Gary Gulman, who I obviously have something on him because he keeps helping me with the festival year after year. He finds a way to help us out, and really the whole Boston scene. I know you help our friends at the studio out, and I'm glad you're here, my friend.
Well, I'll tell you what you have on me is you're a good friend. You're good at being a friend, and I treasure friendships the way some people treasure their family. I'm sort of my family is a mixed bag in that they undermine me and mute a lot of joy, whereas the friends I've collected over the years have been incredibly encouraging and supportive. And also, I don't even know if you remember this, but I used to frequently sleep on your couch in Queens.
We could have started it. We could have started an agency with just the people that slept on our couch. You and Frank Zanarelli and Justin McKinney.
Yeah, and I mean it's a very generous thing. Like a lot of times you weren't even there.
I know.
Bernadette was working. You were on the road, and it would just be me. And I just thought that was so trusting and generous. So, but pretty much anything within reason you ask me, which is what you asked me to do shows, which I would do anyways, and you asked me to come on and talk to you for an hour, which I'm happy to do under any circumstances.
Right.
So
and we're overdue.
These aren't big asks. I hope at some point you're going to ask me for something that I have to think twice about.
Yeah, when I ask to stay with you, you're going to be like, I think we're good. Let's just keep it virtual. Let's not. Right. Our friendship's more of a through the computer thing, Jim. It's not a real life thing.
But we're also super tall guys in a profession where it's not usually this tall.
Yeah, you know what I always wanted to say this. Like, I'm 6'6" if I'm not slouching, and you're 6'6", I believe too. Is that right?
Yeah.
And we never really talked about that, but I was thinking about today, and I think that being tall in comedy is good.
Yes.
Because you end up in like places without stages in front of dartboards. You kind of bring your own stage. But being tall and acting, not so good, right?
Yeah, I mean, but then there's always the patron saint with Brad Garrett, who's this really tall comedian, and I always feel like, well, if they can cast him, then I can't make any excuses. So he sort of took away all my excuses. But yeah, it can be very, very difficult to get cast with certain sized people, and you kind of have to play a guy who they call attention to his size.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, if there's an action, I'm not say, let's just take Tom Cruise for example. You can't walk into the room next to him. That can never happen. I don't even think in real life you could be or would be allowed to stand next to him.
Unless you play like a goon who is there to know how he is.
If he was like an action, elf defending the North Pole.
Right.
Now we're never going to work with him. Let's just get it all done. Let's like.
Right. I'm
right through the checklist, Gary.
Yeah.
Oh man. So
I'm always surprised at how short a lot of these people are. It's I wouldn't say it's disappointing. It's just surprising because you meet them and you think, oh, they were around a lot of really short people.
Right. I blame this all on Charlie Chaplin, by the way. Charlie Chaplin was like 5'2", and he hired people around him, and they never changed it. They kept that. They made the doors smaller. They made, what I mean?
Oh my word!
And now my wife will get mad. Bernadette will get mad at me sometimes because I'll watch a movie and I'll go, "Look at him! He's walking by the car. Look how tall he is." If I get something to like gauge it.
Yeah.
I could take him.
Yeah. But that's always the question I ask when somebody meets somebody famous. I always say, were they tall?
Yeah, right. See, I never knew this about you. We've had the same obsession,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we were just talking before this whole live feed started, and I started to ask you this, but you did a great series of tweets about how to write comedy And one of the things I thought right away was rules number one should be just write.
Yeah.
Like I think you did say this every day, because you've had, you know, I see real discipline with you with writing, and that I don't necessarily have. And if I'm envious of anything, it's like I wish I had that drive that you have to go every day. I'm going to pick up a pen, or however you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. First got into comedy. You know, right away that you're not as funny as a lot of guys and girls and men and women. And you say, well, what will be my thing? And I said, I'm going to have to write and write and write and write my way into improvement, because I didn't have any, I wasn't especially confident. Like, I would get very nervous, and I had heard the stories about Jerry Seinfeld being very, very disciplined. He had told the stories of how hard he worked, and I thought, well, I can emulate that. And one of the things I realized early on was that I felt pretty good when I was prepared. So I would always prepare. And then the other thing was that the hardest part of writing was actually just opening up a notebook, because once you open up the notebook and even just put the date and where you were in, you had broken over that inertia, which really is so strong. The inertia to keep doing whatever you're doing, even if it's not pleasant, is so strong. So that once I started doing that, and I had my notebook open and my pen was moving, I could keep doing that. And then over the years, I've accumulated so many things, even from guys who weren't even doing comedy anymore, but they would tell me things, and I would keep track of them. And I remember just one of the biggest things I heard early on was that most of your work, like the gigs you would get, would come from other comedians. And so It was important to be a comedian that the other comedians respected and also wanted to hang around with. Not that you had to be the life of the party or anything, but that you were a decent, reliable guy who I mean, comedians love it when you take comedy seriously and showing that you're working at it. They appreciate that, like any normal woman or man does. When you join somebody's guild, like it's sort of like a guild, you want the other people to be as serious about it as you are. And so I think that was important. And then the other thing, the guiding light was just to try to be a comedian who I would want to see. And that really just colors every single one of those little choices you make as a comedian, even whether it's something to wear or whether to say cupcake or Kit Kat. You think it's either cupcake or Kit Kat. What would I rather see? Well, I'd rather hear a brand name, so I'll say Kit Kat. but it doesn't really make a difference. The same laugh will come about, but it takes the time you spend worrying about whether cupcake or Kit Kat is funnier.
Right.
So
it's a little more specific.
Yeah. So I couldn't believe it when people really responded to the tips. And then I started to expand my scope, in that they weren't all writing tips. At first they were all writing tips, and then they just became tips about getting through the day, whether you're depressed or anxious or things like that. Like, one of my favorite tips was that if you're finding that comedy is making you terribly anxious and depressed, then address that and then get back to comedy. Let your art suffer for you, rather than letting you suffer for your art. So that was probably the few main ones that I would say, if you only took a few of them. But they're all available at Vulture. Vulture did a great job of compiling them and organizing them and putting fun little what do you call it? Illustrations. I always use the word cartoons, and then I remembered illustration, and I thought that's actually a better term. So they're little illustrations. Yeah, and
I'm
so
definitely
that's
gonna
been
look that
really
up.
good. Yeah.
Did you ever write one down and you go, why am I not following this and for this advice I'm giving
Oh,
out?
well, don't you think that a lot of advice you're actually giving yourself? You're
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that all the time. I used to give the same advice to people that I had been given, and as I'm saying it, I'm saying, yeah, you needed a refresher on that. Like I remember there was this man who owns the comedy club called the Comedy and Magic Club in Los Angeles, and you've been there, and on the wall there are bricks with autographs from literally Jerry Seinfeld and David Letterman, and every famous comedian you know. And he said, and it was either Jay Leno or Jerry Seinfeld, or maybe it's just apocryphal, but he said that they said, I never worried about managers and agents and getting on TV sitcoms. My main thing that I would ask myself is, are you getting funnier? And if you can answer yes to that, then you're on your way. You're doing the thing that you have control over. And you realize 3 or 4 years in that if you try to control anything more than your notebook and your act, it is painful. So
Yeah.
I think that's great advice, and I need to be reminded of that frequently. And luckily, it's over the years it's sort of set in. So that's my natural posture. But for a long time, I was always comparing myself to the other comedians, and over 4 or 5 years you can fall way behind, but over 30 years, which I'm coming up on in a couple of years, things even out based on hard work and talent, and mostly hard work, I think.
I think you're right. You know,
Yeah.
I opened for Jerry Seinfeld about a million years ago, and I was horrible. And but I asked him for advice because I just thought he was the greatest thing ever. You know, I
Yeah.
just couldn't believe how great he was. And he wrote on this thing, I have it in my basement on the wall, but it says work underlined.
Yeah.
Because I asked him what advice he'd give me, he just put work
Yeah.
underlined, you know.
Yeah. I used to write that on my notebooks because I was such a worrier, and I would write work, don't worry.
Yeah. I like to
Yeah.
finish this interview, but I got to get some writing done tonight, Carrie.
I
Cut the black and scene.
Yeah, I start every day by writing longhand in this thing. They're called morning pages. I got them from the Artist's Way, and they're helpful in the long run. You don't see huge differences in your work right away, but in the long run, they're really terrific, because you need that constant reminder that it is not hard to just write. It's hard to write something incredible,
Yeah.
but you have to write so much crap to get to the incredible, and sometimes the lousy idea leads to the incredible thing, or just the thing that comes up in the just the just the thing that comes up in the, like, you're so good at this thing that came up in your day or in your life will come up in a show, and you'll play on that, and it's just it's so exciting to watch that.
You know, I think I read something too. Stephen King, when he started, about how many words he wrote a day, how many pages. He just like explode. I know, obviously, the guy writes a book every 3 days or something, but he just writes so much that he's just writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. You know.
Yeah. Stephen King is so inspiring, and I read his book a couple of times called Stephen King on Writing, and it's just the other thing that people don't think about, and comedians, I think are some are readers and some aren't, but Stephen King always talks about how much he reads, and he actually listed all the books he read, and I really think you either, and it doesn't matter for me whether I listen to the book or I read it, but I find that it's really helpful to refresh and also remind me of certain words and certain techniques, and also just especially with nonfiction, you learn about these things that really maybe you want to avoid I want to avoid the things that a lot of the comedians are covering, because I don't think I can't on the whole, I'm not going to come up with the best, say, joke about the election, because there are thousands of people coming up with it. But I could come up with a good joke about something that nobody else is talking about, and it'll be the best joke of that genre, because nobody else is talking about it. And at the very least, people will say, "Oh, that was weird." So, I think there's something to that. Like, every time I've done something weird, I've been rewarded for it, or kind of risky, I've been rewarded for it. So I think that's an interesting lesson I've learned over the years, that maybe in the room that night I get more laughs doing something that's more in the mainstream, but the things that have been lasting over the years were the things that people would say, "Oh, I didn't know that there was anything funny there," and there isn't. It's just a matter of sort of unearthing it, I guess, or scraping it out.
Yeah, it seems like a comedy, like you're creating it on the stage. Like, I think this is true of you, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I see you starting to write a chunk of material, and you're not really sure where it's all going at first. You got to kind of get it up on its feet, and then you think of, a tag, a line, a thing, and starts to pull together, and then suddenly, I know how I'm going to end this thing. I know where this is going.
Yeah. Like, when I first started, I used to hang around with you and also Joey Carroll.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember Joey Carroll at all?
Oh, I still hang out with him.
I know. That's why I said that. No, so Joey and
I thought you saw him on a milk carton this morning or something.
No, Joey, myself, and Paul D'Angelo went on this gig, and Paul was a hero to a lot of, I mean, he still is, but when you're first starting out, you're like, this guy is so funny, and he's friendly, and he's such a regular guy. He had this joke, and it was called Suck World, right? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was about an amusement park for adults that showed you how awful life was. And yeah, and it was brilliant, and it went on. I mean, at that time it was probably 15 minutes long. And I remember sitting with Joey, and Joey had been doing it for a couple of years when I started, but he had seen Suck World at the beginning, and he said, that was just like a one-liner. And that was such a great lesson, that this great thing had to start somewhere. And it's, I mean, it sounds silly, but I always say, just write a funny sentence. Write a funny sentence. And I used to get so discouraged, because I would write 10 pages on a subject. I'd go on stage, put out a few sentences, not a single laugh, and I'd say I wasted my whole day. So I made a rule that I wouldn't really go to town on something until I got a sentence to work, and then I would really try to dig and see what else I could do. But if I didn't have that sentence, I felt like I didn't want to spend too much time, because I mean, I used to be completely, this never seemed to happen with you, because you were so even keel, but I used to be devastated by a bad set, and just not really be able to feel good about myself until I had a good set. And in my early days, that could be months. So it was just me moping around the house, trying to think of something, and thinking, will I ever think of something? And you will. I mean, you do. We always do. But it's daunting, especially when you first start.
When I first started, I think I was like Jim the Cooler McCue. Like, like the crowd, they're overheating, they're laughing too much. Bring the cooler in so we can sell some booze.
Yeah.
They can take a break, go to the men's room, order some more drinks.
Yeah.
McCue can handle that.
Yeah. Oh my word. That is so true. But I remember you were an excellent professional by the time I started, and you gave me my first paid gig. You and Bob Carney, the three of us, drove to Cambridge, New York.
Wow.
Which was like, I think it was like 8 hours from Boston.
And we probably made $100 each.
I think maybe you got 100 for headlining.
That was the closing money.
Yeah. Yeah. And we got a motel room that Bob and I shared with you, the three of us. And I got to tell you, I have nothing but fond memories of it. It was
That's
awesome.
hilarious.
We talked comedy all the way there. We talked comedy all the way back. We just had a great time. And I remember we had just got this New York magazine. You were living in Queens at the time, I think, or were starting to go down there. We got a New York magazine, and it was talking about this new sensation called Dave Attell.
Oh wow.
That was the article, how much of a powerhouse he was, but he was virtually unknown. I had never really heard of him. Yep. And it talked about him, and it was a great article, and it actually was one of those articles where you see him and you think, oh, they could have been even more hyperbolic in their praise, because he's actually better than this.
Right.
In this
right.
article,
off the charts.
He was, maybe because they couldn't print exactly what he was saying, but he was even better than they had hyped him to be.
Yeah. That's wild. That's the other thing too, I think, that we have in common. Like when you start out with people, those friendships, because you go through, like, normal people don't drive 8 hours for 50 or $100 and be happy about it. You know, like, well, they're going to feed us. Oh, they're going to feed us? Not off the entree menu, just the sandwiches.
Yeah.
The beverages are on you.
Right. You'll be eating whatever the employees there are allowed to eat, which is, it was hilarious. But I always think, why is it that the guys and women that we started off with are still doing it? And it's because we were attracted to the seriously do an 8-hour drive for no money, and that's the greatest indication of whether somebody will ultimately succeed and have a life in this circus world.
Yeah, and it was always kind of an adventure too. You know, who are you going to get in the car with? And then as you get older and you get jaded, you go, like Tony V told me this once, like, I used to say, who am I working with? Who am I working with? You know? And then he said, I don't do that anymore. And I said, why? He says, because if it's someone I don't like, then it bums me out for like a month in advance. He says, I'd rather just show up and I just got like 1 hour of awkwardness, you know, like, I was like, that's genius. I'm going to do that.
It's so true. And I think the other thing is that we all know the names, that if they say the name, you don't even have to hear the money.
No.
It's either yes or no, whether you hear the money, depending on who you're going to work with. So there are certain people who you wouldn't work with for $1 million. Right. And then there are people who, if they said, well, you have to pay us, you would say that, well, that's fine, because I want to work with Joey Carroll or Dom Fig or Robert Kelly or Paul D'Angelo. The money is no object. Yeah.
Right. It's a fun night out.
Yeah. I'm going to have a great time. We're going to laugh, and I'm going to watch a great show, and we'll have a great time talking on the way there and the way back.
There's also clubs that are great, and like the owners are great. They treat you great.
Yes.
You know, like, and Comedy Magic Club is a great example of that. You get treated so well. The first time I worked there, it was still payphone days. I was calling Bernadette from the payphone. I was like, this place is great. I'm having great, you know, all these people here. I didn't know what I was walking into. I just had tapes there, and he picked me, and I so now I'm there. I couldn't believe there was a parking for performers, and I'm not the headliner. I'm just a guy from Boston. So I just tell me where in the street. The guy's going, it's okay. It's okay. I go, no, I don't want it, because I thought they're going to find my car up there. And Mike Lacey caught me on the phone on the payphone. He goes, what are you doing? I go, I got 15 minutes before I got to go on again. He goes, No. He goes, I got a phone. Use my phone. Don't use a pay phone.
Yes.
I was like, who is this guy?
Yes.
He's treating me nice. This is not what owners do.
Yes.
You know?
And it takes so little to stand out from the other owners, because they're usually so greedy or nasty, that if you are thoughtful and offer a meal or free parking, where you own us for life,
Right. Yeah, this guy made me comfortable. He let me sit in a chair. I wasn't on a, sitting on a barrel of rice, or, wasn't in the, wait outside. We'll open the door and tell you, whatever it is, like, I mean, but those are all those stories of the bad clubs too. We still carry those around as badges of honor now. Like, remember that gig I did in, in Springfield,
Yes. Yes. It's worth doing if you get a story, and it's how I feel about life. Life is worth the effort if you get a good story out of it.
Yeah. Hey, I gotta mention the Great Depression movie, man. I saw it. It was great.
Oh,
I really did. I was like, wow. And I didn't know a lot of that stuff about you. I didn't know, what you were going through or any of that. And I'm glad you had the courage to not only face all of that, but I mean, you made it damn special about it, and you're helping other people now.
oh, thank you. I think that, I mean, it's nice of you to say courage, but the real courage is the part where I kept getting out of bed every day and walking my dogs and living my life, because it was really hard. I mean, the thing that is hard to describe about depression is that it reduces your energy and makes a lot of things that are easy, and you remember being easy, incredibly difficult. So I think like the most dramatic thing physically that happened was my wife, who is about 5'10". She would like lap me when we were walking around the block. I couldn't keep up with her, and I would beg her to slow down. And as soon as I was feeling well, it became the opposite as usual. I was always a little bit faster than her, and it was not hard to walk around the block, and I could walk my dogs for long periods of time without wanting to go back. And so I appreciate the word courage, but I really look at people who are having a hard time right now as the really courageous, because right now it's so easy for me to do stand up or write and exercise and do all those things. And when it was really hard, when I would have to psych myself up and promise myself that I don't say phone it in with my comedy, but there were times when I would say I don't have the strength to try a new joke, because if it doesn't work, I'm going to feel terrible about myself and not be able to get out of bed in the morning. And I would go back and do jokes that I'd been doing for years, and I felt guilty over it, but I knew that it was important that I just get on stage, and I knew I'd feel better by being around the people. So I really appreciate that. And then by the grace of God or the universe or whatever you believe in, I was able to take that experience and turn it into something that could give people some information, but also just the knowledge that they're not going through something that's, one, unique to them, and two, untreatable. It's treatable.
Hey, Gare.
All right, so sorry about that. My phone died. I was saying that I've had the sturdiest recovery of close to 3 years from my depression, and I part of it, I think, and you can attest to this, is the amount of strength having a thoughtful and caring wife has brought to me. I mean, it's huge in treatment, and my wife was so patient and went with me to every psychiatrist appointment and every treatment appointment, and it was I mean, she was really the MVP of that story. I definitely, I mean, I may have survived, but I don't think I would have thrived the way I have been over the past few years without her.
That's great. Yeah, I was just saying to Bernadette today, I'm like, sometimes I look at her, I'm like, what? Why do you even like me? You know, like, like I don't really see what I'm bringing to this. You know, like,
yeah, it's so.
I can't tell you why you should like me.
Yeah,
you know,
I know. So many times my wife will say, "I love you," and I'll say, "Why? Tell me why. Show your work."
Yeah, and my way of torturing her is once in a while I'll be like, "You're so lucky you found me. I can't believe it. I can't believe what a lucky person you are to find." And then she'll go, "Yeah, I must have done something." I go, "You must have done something to deserve this. I don't know what it was."
Yeah, but I also find that I mean, of course there are exceptions, but most of the comedy wives are really decent and thoughtful and kind, but also they're you can't be materialistic and shallow if you're with a comedian, because we're broke for so much of the time.
That's right.
That it's just you find people with better values than maybe the average job will find, because they're definitely not with us for our money.
No. Absolutely not. Yeah. And they got to put up, and the funny thing now, this put us to a different kind of test, this COVID thing, because I was doing cruise ships, Gary. I was going on the road all the time, as you know.
Right.
So Bernadette never had to put up with me for more than 3 days at a time. Now, 6 months of this.
Yes. I hadn't thought about that, but it's such a difference in our lifestyle. I hadn't thought about how much more of me she is getting, and how that is not a good thing.
No, it's truckloads of it. It's 24/7. It used to be like, well, he's annoying me, but he's got a gig in 2 days, so I'll have the house back and he'll be gone.
That is an underrated safety valve that comedians and comedy wives have, and comedy husbands have, that the wife will go out of town and the man will stay home and be working, and he'll get a break from the things that irritate him, and she'll get a break. Yeah.
And I also think, like, you know, because as a comedian, if you go away for a weekend or something, for 4 days you can revert to the animal that you actually are. You're like in a hotel room. You got like underwear on the lamp. You got like you know, like you're eating out of a pizza box with no plates. You know, like you're like a panda. You know.
Yes.
And then you got to pull it all together and pretend you're a better human being when you go back for a couple of days. You know?
How many times have you found that they forgot to put the utensils in the delivery, and you're eating salad with your hand?
And not even bothered by it. You know, you're okay.
No.
Yeah. And when you're home in the domicile with your wife for a year straight, you can't hide that anymore.
No.
They're like, oh, wow. Hey, Gare, before I lose you.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes.
I mostly spend my days writing the book, which is called K through 12, and it is a memoir based on my ridiculous memory for my years in school. So I have this incredible memory down to like phone numbers and conversations and very specific. It's in some ways it's a curse, because I have been grinding these axes for years, and we're remembering pain very, very deeply for many years. But as far as this book is, it's really a great resource, because I've been able to tell these stories about every year, and some of them are funny, but there's a mix of also stories where I like, there's this story where I had this best friend, and then he got cancer, and he lived, but he became so popular that I wasn't the only game in town anymore, and I sort of I essentially lost him to his sort of cancer celebrity, and it was very painful, because I found myself being very jealous, and it was this bizarre thing where I felt terrible. I'd go to visit him in the hospital, and then I'd worry that other kids would visit him, and that I guess a lot of kids have that
Sure.
sort of that sort of greediness about their friends and things. But
they do that with their parents too. They're like, if you I'll leave, and you'll be your whole, I'll die, and then you'll have to live without me, and you'll see.
yes. And so it's a lot of these stories, before I shared them, I thought they were commonplace, or the fact that I remembered them was not unusual. And so the more I've been writing, I've found that the stories are resonating. And I guess you think and this is a great idea in comedy too, you think when you go too specific that you're going to lose people, and it's a lot of times it's the opposite. And when you get really specific, people are it really
Connects.
strikes a chord with them. It connects. Yes. Yeah.
That's crazy funny. I also, there's this theory out there, I'm sure I'm not the first one that thought of it. It's like, when you're young, your brain is a sponge. It can absorb all this information so rapidly, and then as you get older, like, that sponge is like, all the RAM is gone. There's no you can't take any more information. You're still pissed about that kid, that got all that attention, and
right. Yeah. The other thing is, I also have been finding that it's easier to figure out when something happened if you can remember what grade it happened in. And then once you get out of school, it's like, I don't know whether that happened in 2006 or 2017. It could have been any of that time. And it's there aren't those bins that you can place these things in.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I want to ask you also about you're working on a show.
Yeah, but it's related to my memory. When I was still, I guess, in high school, it was when I was in high school, these gym teachers approached me about playing football my senior year, and then they trained me for the summer between my junior year and my senior year. These two guys, they were twins, and they were really fun, and they were really like positive and energetic. And they trained me how to play football and how to lift weights and everything. And then I played that 1 year of high school football, and they got me a football scholarship to Boston College. So I did it as an interview for This American Life with Ira Glass, and then I met with Adam McKay's company, and he had listened to the pod. Well, it's like a radio show, but it's also a podcast. He had listened to it, and he said he wanted to develop it into a series. So I've been working with a writer to work on a pilot about a high school I wouldn't be the star of it. It would be a kid playing somebody like me who plays high school football and then becomes a college athlete. But what makes it really unusual is that I was not a tough, cool, or very aggressive kid, and I just was athletic, and it was a real culture shock for me. And when I went to BC to play college football, it was very frightening, but funny, and sad at the same time, because I was overwhelmed at first, and it was really hard. But it's sort of like Friday Night Lights meets Freaks and Geeks. I think is the best way to put it. Yeah, so it's really been fun to get rewarded like this for my nostalgia.
Yeah. I think about when I saw the Great Depression, I think I got that right. I hope I did. But
Yeah.
you talked about being, and this, because I have the same thing. I'm 6'6", and
Yes.
I was always tall. And like I remember getting in a fight when I was 12 with an 18-year-old. You know, we were eye to eye, but I was not ready for that. You know, like,
No.
But you know, my friends pushed me up into the front of the line because I was the biggest guy they had, and it didn't end well. But
oh no.
you know, and I thought about you, the way you described it, of like building a man suit.
Yes.
You know, and I just thought that was a great way to say that. Like you had to, like, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, we're from basically the same generation. There wasn't a lot of patience with really tall boys who weren't athletic or aggressive. It was
Right.
we were teased or
Right.
or taken advantage of, and it was not easy. I always say that it is it's a blessing, but it's also something that you really need to know who you are to navigate that.
It's funny because I think of that too. Like you really had to, like, you know, you were going to get in a couple fights because you had to like straighten that out soon.
Yes.
And not that you wanted to, but it was like a prison thing. It's like you had to, like, because the older kids were going to pick you out.
Yeah.
You know?
And also they always say, if you go to prison, pick out the biggest guy and beat him up so you build a rep. But I always felt like that poor biggest guy in the prison.
What if he's 12?
Yeah. What if he's...
That ain't right.
I mean, he's had to fight every day since prison opened.
Oh, no.
He's tired.
Bring Gus out here. Oh, no, not again. Not again.
Oh, my word.
Okay, beat me up. As long as you buy me cigarettes.
Here we go. Here we go. I would... Gus
must be Tuesday. Must be New Guy Tuesday.
Yeah. He probably just will take a dive at this point for a pack of cigarettes.
Oh, man. Well, Gary, on that positive note,
yes,
for tall kids everywhere,
yeah,
I want to thank you so much for doing this and be a part of the crazy, weird virtual Boston Comedy Festival this year.
It's a pleasure, and hopefully next year we'll able to do something in person.
I hope so, man. I hope so. I always look forward to that.
No, we will. We'll be vaccinated, or
let's get vaccinated together. We'll make a day of it.
And we'll get tattoos around the vaccination.
Sounds good. Gary, thank you so much, man.
Thanks.
You're the best.
Thanks for reaching out anytime. Send my love to Bernadette.
Will do.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, Jim.
Bye, Gary. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. That was the great Gary Gulman. And I'm Jim McCue. This is going to be re-released after I edit it up into the Big Comedy Podcast. And it will also be on my YouTube channel. So you could find me, Jim McCue, I guess would work.